So good day, everyone. My name is Brian Prophet with the Open Source Program Office at Red Hat, welcoming you to another edition of Community Central. Before I introduce today's guest, I do want to take the usual housekeeping note and remind everyone that if you have questions for our presenter today, you're certainly welcome to use the Q&A tool within Primetime. Like the questions that you see, and after his presentation today, we will certainly get to those questions in order of popularity. And as always, we welcome any questions for our guests. That makes it really a special part of the episode. So, housekeeping out of the way, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Alan Scott, a chief architect with Red Hat Healthcare. Alan's going to be talking about an exciting new project that's part of the Team 19 effort. Again, Team 19, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the program that has been started within Red Hat to help focus associate efforts on COVID-related open source projects. If you're not part of Red Hat, you certainly will be welcome to join the effort as a general open source contribution. And we'll have information about that later on after the presentation. So Alan, big, long, lengthy introduction, but I welcome you to Community Central today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Brian, and welcome everybody. It's a privilege to be presenting to you. Today we're going to talk about how we're building a healthcare open source community, and we're starting with our connected health or intelligent data as a service platform. In order to level set everyone, in case you don't know, I wanted to start with what the business of healthcare is. A lot of folks just think it is about you get treatment, you get a bill, and you go through that regular process. What they don't a lot of times see is the amount of interactions that happen with entities that they might not be either aware of how involved they are or what systems can do. So if you want to think about the business of healthcare, let's think about the government role. Government sets fee schedules, which everyone then can work with, which means that's how physicians get paid. At the state and federal level, they also set mandates for what is required, which turns into legislation. And because of that, it also turns into what I term as imposed oversight, which means organizations can be fined and shut down for either their ability to comply or inability to comply. And much as you've seen with the COVID effort going on right now, a lot of the insurance regulations have been completely removed, and a lot of the provider regulations have been completely unimposed as well because of the treatment of going on in the pandemics. So if you all think about government's role, then you think about what payers provide, right? Your insurance company. They set non-governmental contract rates in terms of agreements for those patients that aren't government focused, right? And government focused are your Medicare, and the states deal with Medicaid through funding. But they also do processing operations. And a key thing to know about processing operations in the payer side of healthcare is they are built and still run from 80s based systems and processes. So when we think about how we modernize industries and verticals, it's just important to understand that. And then when you think about the healthcare provider, you go into a provider to get service. All your data lives in these things they call EHRs, right? That is your Epics, your Cerners, etc. Here's the thing a lot of people don't know, that healthcare systems buy that software, but effectively lease the information, which means about 90% of healthcare customers are contractually precluded from accessing that licensed systems data directly. So for us as technologists, we don't understand why, it's in the database, just go get it. Why can't they innovate faster? There's actually a contract that precludes them with licensing, penalties, fees, and the like. So their core way of accessing any information typically is through purchased data, which is what we call interfaces or integration, just so everybody has that level of understanding about how healthcare works from the government side through the insurers and then on the provider side. So as you think about the state of healthcare today, and we're going to run you through why IDAS is what it is, and then talk about the power of the community we're building. That change that we talked about reimbursement and healthcare plan contracting is huge, top of the mind for healthcare leadership. And it's causing this transformation at work. And there's also those regulations that we're going to talk about that are ongoing that not only impact COVID today, but will impact disease and outbreak detections for the future as we see them. And COVID has also produced the problem of consumer engagement in a huge way, because a consumer in healthcare is one of several entities. It's a patient, but it's also the person that's not a patient that's deciding where they want to go, right? So you've all seen the miles of lines of people getting COVID tests. Those are non-consumers showing up because the media or an organization put out, hey, come get your COVID test here. So those are non-consumers doing something. But you've also got partners in healthcare. Partners are how people get PPE to places, right? That personal protective equipment that you hear about. And they're the clinicians that are providing services. Those are all the consumers in a healthcare system. So when we talk about consumer engagement, it's a lot more than just, oh, we need to get people into the hospital for treatment. But then organizations are now realizing more than ever that data is what powers their organization, and it's what's going to drive their business. And they also know from a leadership level that they need to continue to focus on value and what they give back to their business stakeholders, and doing it in a very timely manner and showcasing that return on investment now more than ever. So if you think about what all that means from a leadership driver perspective, that means about limiting proprietary technologies. It means about starting to think about expert systems. If you don't build them, how do you leverage them? And then that data as a service commoditization to help the business move faster in the clinical space like it's never moved before, whether it's billing, whether it's clinical information, whether it's doing anything around the healthcare system, data is going to be what powers that. So to us at Red Hat in the healthcare market, our focus is and will be around data is the asset. Because without it, you can't build applications, you can't build warehouses, you can't build anything that can respond in near real time. So data must be the asset. Because it's the asset, it has to be about value transformation. And value transformation is very simple as you think about it. It literally is a mathematical calculation that says your outcome is nothing, your value is nothing more than your outcome divided by your costs. What that means to us is we must put content and context to information into technologists' hands so they can help deliver the systems of tomorrow and help reinvent to capitalize on that information that exists. In order to do that, you have to walk an organization through a value transformation. And it's 4 simple steps we're going to cover. It's first accelerating that digitization effort, realizing that your journey is going to be different than everyone else's, but as long as you're focused on a hybrid cloud model and you can focus around that, you are starting in the right direction because IT is the asset. It's also then about enabling efficiency, which means turning data into a serviceable entity. It also is about automation of security and compliance requirements as you're having to roll out systems faster than you've ever before. And it's also about scaling to the enterprise needs on demand. That will lead you to improved performance, which means on demand, you can help influence the business events that are occurring by giving them that information. Then by doing that, you move to a strategic partner level with doing that. And then you finally evolved your ecosystem, which means you're now part of that central nervous system because you're not only the order taker, you're the order maker and helping drive value for that business. But as we think about all that, and as you think about COVID, also keep in mind during this time, in case you guys were not aware, that government organizational model that I talked about in the first slide has also produced some regulations that have gone into effect about reducing data barriers for the consumer space. And that organization is called CMS. And CMS has come out with requirements for and dates for both providers and payers. Everything I'm going to talk about here is based on an industry standard that's come in the last 10 years. It's called FHIR. It's FHIR, and it's about fast health interoperability. Now, the thing to note about FHIR is it's the first time in healthcare there's been a published standard that both payers and providers can leverage that is not able to be changed. In other words, the industry controls the standard. So in the past, standards were very pliable per organization, per implementation. We used to always joke in healthcare, if you've seen one vendor's interface, you've seen one vendor's interface at one facility, because you go to the next facility and that same vendor interface is drastically different. So that's a massive shift. And that shift is around consumerization. So as you think about that, next year they've moved these dates back because obviously with COVID going on, there was some problems. But patient data access APIs. This means you're going to be able to get your information that you can see on the screen. Here's the key thing to note, though. This isn't about necessarily you having to be a developer to get it. This is about you controlling where that information goes. If the folks at Apple want to build another health app and it goes on it and you tell the organization that you want to share that data with them, then absolutely. And the organization, as part of these requirements, cannot tell you no. They can tell you that they don't necessarily want you to, and if you say do it, they must do it and comply. So this is a massive shift for healthcare. So your patient data will be available for you to put into one or many applications. Then the next one is going to be around provider directory API. That is going to start sharing information of who provides care for what and where. It's also going to include, if you're certain types of Medicare, who's providing formulary coverage. The next major shift as we look to 2022 near the end is going to be about payers exchanging data. Now, what that means is if today you're with an insurance company and next year that changes to another insurance company and then another insurance company the following year, for up to 5 years, those insurance companies will be able to transact and maintain all of your information. And that is key because that is the first time they're being mandated to do it. Previously, you would have this notion of what's called the pre-existing condition, but insurance companies wouldn't really share information. They might not know what it is. And now that's all going to be moving away. And they're doing that with a standard called USCDI, which is around continued integration. So as we think about all that, Red Hat's healthcare transformation has to be about data, because if the government's focus is on reducing a data barrier and an organization struggles, as healthcare has struggled for decades, to process information, data is the asset. And that's where Connected Health and IDaaS came from. So from a background perspective, as you look to the visual on the right, you will see that our focus is around making data that central nervous system for healthcare. It's about unifying teams around data and making sure that it's the asset that they can come to so that they can build amazing platforms. And because of Red Hat, they can build it in a secure and scalable and reusable manner. The what of what we're delivering is a repeatable and reusable design pattern. You could think of it as a framework. You could think of it as an accelerator. But literally, it's meant on meeting data where it is, and it's meant on focusing on the fact that if it is an industry standard, a legacy format, we can move it, uplift it, and help organizations. It's also not about competing with existing platforms that are in the market space. It's about contributing back. It's about that open source culture that we have. It's not the notion of innovation. We have to remove the word replacement in our mindset as we talk to our customers, because they want to innovate. And the people that are helping them innovate, like Red Hat is, are winning the battle because we not only will take data in any shape and any size that it is, we'll take it from any vendor that it is, and we'll do what we do in open source. We contribute back. And then how we do it is through that open source that open organization and open source culture that we have all throughout what we do. It's about that hybrid cloud approach, and it's about just us delivering on our promise and our commitment. So if you think about all that and you think about healthcare, our focus, again, with Connected Health and IDaaS is around 5 to 6 common use cases that cover 90+% of healthcare, both payer and provider in this space. It's about that modern meeting data where it is, right? Which means you might have Kafka for streaming data. You could have queues for streaming data. You could have files, SFTP, relational databases, mainframes that store information. It's also about clinical integration that we call legacy, which is a standard called HL7. As you heard me talk about with CMS, it's also about FHIR resources, and it's about building and processing them. It's also about doing dynamic data transformation, moving data from a shape that we have into the shape that we need for healthcare. Those are those common use cases that we help facilitate with our platform in a consistent manner. With all that being said, the whole focus is, what do we showcase to customers? What we showcase with our Connected Health platform today is around our ability to move HL7 messages for systems, because that is a core of business that healthcare must do. It's also around moving clinical resources, and I listed one here called a concept. It's also about moving FHIR resources like we talked about called a claim, right? And you also have other things that we could do. I just listed one. But it's also about showcasing what is possible with our technologies. For that, we call that healthcare event distribution. What that means to us is you send us a transaction or a message from an industry perspective, and we can move it to one-to-many places. And lastly, it's about showing healthcare an event-driven architecture. We've built a technology for that we call Event Builder that people are contributing to. That is that reshaping data into what the customer needs or what events the healthcare ecosystem needs as a whole. And then as we talked about CMS, we're working on some demos that specifically showcase that. And it's important to understand for Team 19, if you're saying, well, why does CMS play into what COVID is doing? There's going to be reporting impact. There's going to be financial impact. There's going to be the ability to know if people have already had tests and what those tests are. So these will impact the future of healthcare as well as we think about tomorrow. Key part of Connected Health and IDaaS for us was not only establishing it as a key value for the healthcare market, but it was also about branding it for Red Hat and making sure that our Red Hat culture was brought all the way through it. So we set up an organization on GitHub. It's Red Hat Healthcare. It's in your top left. And we've also set up a website called that you see on your right for Connected Health and IDaaS, so you can get to it. The website gets frequent updates. There's another one due to be pushed out. We've also branded our projects that we have on the screen. A key branding for us beyond IDaaS was the notion of Connect. So IDaaS Connect focuses on how information comes from systems that we would connect to. So that's where you'll see those traditional things we talked about. That's HL7, that's FHIR. Third party means anything else. But the notion is, how do we build things that are reusable to provide to the healthcare market space that can help in this pandemic and well beyond? There's also the notion of how do we do that event distribution that we've built in. And again, that's in that IDaaS Connect branding model called IDaaS Connect Data Distribution. You'll see Event Builder, which is in the center of your screen. That is where we do that reshaping that I continue to talk about. Then one of the things we're excited about that we're building with the Team 19 folks is what we've called DREAM, which is about data real-time enterprise automation or enablement. That is where we can showcase to the healthcare community how you can use business rules to drive information about things that are occurring real time. And if you want to think about an example of that, think about disease detection, outbreak detection, condition detection. It might surprise everyone to know that doesn't exist today. So our ability to take decision management, to build rules, to dynamically look at information real time, to be able to say, this looks like a positive test. What do we do? Do we report it to the state, the government, the chief nursing officer? Who do we report this to? How many places does it need to go? Or do we notify the patient? Do we notify a consumer engagement hub? How do we do those things? That's where this IDaaS Dream component will fit in for us, because it will enable a healthcare organization to do things dynamically in a quick manner. But as you've heard about all those things that we have built or are building for IDaaS, the key thing to note is our open source and open organization construct is all about enabling and empowering healthcare with IDaaS. So how do we empower healthcare? We view everyone as a partner. That means to us that whether you're a consumer, you're a delivering organization, you're an SI, everyone is a partner. We want to infuse our infectious culture and open source mindset into healthcare. We want to enable them to refocus on where we know that the solutions and platforms get built from, which is the data. Then you can start to drive that expert system mindset. Because right now what you have is siloed organizations. So by delivering data at that level and driving expert systems, we are going to naturally help break down those silos, because we're going to force things to come together at the information level, not at the departmental level, which they currently exist. And then we also get to showcase not only Red Hat's amazing people, but we get to showcase our amazing portfolio of solutions that can help them do this. And I think the image to the right says it best. You have all these data points coming in from so many places. And what IDaaS is about is bringing them together for somebody to build solutions. Notice we don't focus on an endpoint of data at all. We focus on data real time as it's occurring, because that's what the actionable event is. So I always get the question, who can transform healthcare? Well, my statement is Red Hat and you. The reason I believe it's you is you don't need healthcare knowledge to help us, because there is no contribution too small. Matter of fact, some of the great folks in the Team 19 effort that have helped us have no healthcare experience. They are helping us in amazing ways deliver documentation, delivering proof points, providing their stories, their case studies, their experiences as to how we make that better from both a clinical and a patient perspective. So there's no contribution too small. Go to our GitHub organizational page, which was on the links. Look at all that code. Figure out how you could do it. The other exciting thing that I would say about this to understand is we're actually rolling this some training programs out. There'll be more information on the healthcare team side as to how we're going to start training up our SAs and folks like that, so they can start reusing these. Because one of the things we wanted to do as part of our organizational assistance to healthcare, not only during COVID but beyond, is make sure that when we go to healthcare customers, we're consistent. We could showcase that we could work in the world that they currently address and for the future. And we don't have to rebuild demonstrations of our capabilities. Those are built. Now we have to start extending them. And always feel free to email me directly. There's no question too small. I really would enjoy the collaboration, the communication, any feedback, any thoughts. It's more than welcome. And with that, Brian, I'd be more than happy to take some questions.
All right. Thank you, Alan, very much. We certainly appreciate it. Great presentation. So we have a couple of related questions from Doug and John. basically asking, like, who is defining the API standards? Is it coming from Red Hat right now, or is there a standards organization or association that's defining those standards?
That's a great question. Typically, what we've seen is uh, that CMS group that I talked about has what is called the FIRE organization that operates the consortium of standards has what they call working groups that are driving those standards. And in those working groups, they're going through them. As you'll have noticed, the key thing to note is I was just on a virtual set of meetings the last 3 days. Those standards that I talked about that are coming in mid 2021, early 2021, and 2022, they're still being worked out through those working groups as to what those final APIs will look like. So I would say that the FIRE community is responsible for communicating to them, but the working groups definitely control their publication. And then there's other industry groups that will contribute, other organizations, but it's mostly an industry thing. This is where our voice in the open source community, I believe, will help drive it, because so far there hasn't really been an advocacy arm to this on the software side.
Okay, great to know. So Raphael asked, are there any plans to add RHDM or PAM into the showcase? He's seen other players such as Sysotech pushing the use of DMN standards to represent decision logic in the healthcare space. So is that something you can address today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There is. So one of the things that I alluded to, I should have probably gone into greater detail about the products that we showcase from a Red Hat perspective, not only today, but tomorrow. There's this notion in healthcare about complex event need, right? So when we think of complex event, we think about our complex event engine. It is an absolute perfect fit for that, right? It is about knowing what happens with the patient from the time they're seen until the time they leave the hospital. So that's a perfect fit. Those are things that we definitely want to add, and that we have the capabilities to do. I think the other thing to note is there are other organizations, specifically BPMN Plus Health, which has come out, which we're candidly partnering with them. We contribute not only to that organization, but the folks that are building on top of that have actually started to partner with us. And it's about building those DML models directly to and from what Red Hat offers today. So that I would say is a work that's underway. I don't want to call it in progress yet, because the key thing is to get the information to be able to leverage it.
Okay, so John asks, have you integrated IDaaS into the Open Data Hub project?
Actually, part of our work is ongoing to do that. So I want to say, think of it this way. I would say yes, it's already done because of the way we get data and the way we can send data. Have we connected to it? That is an ongoing effort as to where we're going to run that. Hopefully that addresses that. But yeah, and I don't see that as a heavy uplift, because literally with the connectors that we use and the practices that we use, I don't see that as a big uplift for us to do. But it's definitely on our minds. And you will hear that expressed in a term called clinical reasoning from our team. So that's our version of healthcare with Open Data Hub and intelligence built around it specifically for healthcare.
Okay, great. So John has another question. Do you have any ideal companies or organizations that you would like to join this community, or is that just basically an open invitation for all?
Candidly, it's an open invitation for all. We've had a lot of people come look at the code. We've transformed it a few times, in full disclosure to everybody on the phone and online. So you don't get the chance to see the commits and everything else, because we've renamed projects and we've moved them around. And honestly, this has been one of those efforts where we've literally tuned the car while we're driving. So it's been a privilege and an honor for me to help and me to lead. But as Brian and Deb and everybody in the CTO office knows, this is the first initiative I've done that's been truly open source. Everything else I've ever done in my life has been community sourced or tightly controlled. So we are definitely learning while we're driving. I just want to say that up front. Hopefully people will get that. And our view of healthcare is everyone's a partner. So right now, if you look at our healthcare solutions, the cool thing for Red Hat is we've already had partners embed IDaaS into their solutions, right? So that is wonderful if you think this effort is less than 4 months old, that we've already had multiple partners do that. We've also had folks take our code and fork the code and build new things off of it for themselves, right? That's one of the things of open source that can happen. But we don't see a barrier to any person or anyone pulling the code and doing a commit. We're looking for any company, any resource. Like I said, we don't view a limitation.
Okay, great. Moving on, Faisal asks, does the IDaaS project have any machine learning use cases working alongside of Open Data Hub?
So from a machine learning perspective, we are focusing on a few things right now. One is a consumer experience piece, right? And I think that's very important. And I think it's very important from a disease perspective. So in our effort, you'll see this notion of what we call assigned insight for disease outbreak and conditions. That is a component that we are building very specifically to give back to the community to drive real-time data value. I do see machine learning playing into that. I also see machine learning playing into organizations that say, I want to build programs off of this. And when IT folks hear programs, they think, ooh, that's development work. Healthcare folks look at a program as I need to serve a community. So I see those things happening for events like we have a critical patient that comes in that could have a disease and how that's impacting their cancer treatment. Or all of a sudden they have a heart condition. Did that stem from the disease that they came in with, right? Like a lot of these post-secondary things. I have a diabetic program. I need to let everyone know that's a diabetic patient to do extra certain things during this time of COVID. So that's where I see machine learning kind of helping us kick in, not to find a patient that they've missed, but to make sure that that communication and collaboration is being coordinated properly and it's being driven effectively. So hopefully you got the answer was yes.
Exactly. A long answer. Catherine asks, has there been any government financial incentives to help providers or payers move towards the elimination of data barriers, like anything in the CARE Act or the other COVID bills that have happened? And obviously, political situations are, very fluid at this point in history. But can you address, what government act on the data barriers being removed?
So I'll say this up front. This is no politics involved, no anything. There has been no politician that has helped healthcare for 30 years. There just hasn't been. I wish they would have been, but there hasn't been, unfortunately. They haven't focused on doing things. So let me give you some examples because I think they're important, and we have 8 minutes before we shut off. A couple of years ago, meaningful use came out. I'm sure everybody heard about meaningful use, right? It was about getting everybody to have their data in an electronic format. That was a bonanza in healthcare for people that built systems. What it wasn't a bonanza in healthcare for was the folks that had to implement and maintain the systems. So the government doled out a bunch of money, right? And again, no political position. This is just what happened. And companies charged people to implement systems. So what you ended up with was now more data siloed in more organizations to solve more of these government mandates that came about. And then from those mandates grew other mandates, right? So this isn't about high tech or anything else. This is just about now that you've got an EHR, you will do these things. Well, when the government says you will do these things or you will be fined, what people don't realize, which is why I wanted to put that in the first slide, is healthcare doctors and organizations that provide care have to pay for that. And if whether you're a big healthcare system or a small community system, you really lease that system because you have to pay for the upgrades, the implementation, as well as all those things they put in place so you can't get information. So hopefully what you heard from that in that answer is there really hasn't been. This effort that's ongoing now is all about opening up the healthcare market to a new set of applications. Almost think about it like, the next generation of Facebook apps coming into healthcare, as I view it from a data perspective.
Okay. We're doing pretty well on time, so we have time for a few more questions. Michael asks, is there any reason why this IDAS project cannot be used, and I think I'm going to correct a typo here, cannot be used for essentially any industry? Also, is there any kind of look forward to any kind of project that Red Hat might be starting around this as a formal project moving forward?
So a few things. I want to make sure that we give kudos to Chris Wright, the CTO organization, and Brian, your organization. This was started by us at Red Hat Healthcare to help position our products and our capabilities and help transform healthcare. It just so happened several months into this effort that the pandemic broke out, right? So Chris Wright's organization said, how can we give back to healthcare? It was almost perfect timing. But understand, as this was going on, folks, we had amazing people in our organization that had done a lot of work. You had the FSI group that has built design patterns for financial services. You have the folks that are doing cars that are doing great stuff, the telco folks. All we did was uplift these design patterns along with some healthcare things. Great resources like Josh Regan, Justin Giray that have been out there that have done amazing things, Simon Green. We just lifted these up and put that healthcare context around them, in some cases made them repeatable. So from my perspective, these design patterns are already implemented in several other groups using similar technologies or the same technologies. They just have that industry or market vertical need associated to them. So I guess the answer is yes, but always keep in mind that markets need different things from information because it has different meaning. And we welcome anybody from any market to come in, talk about what we've done, but we always want to make sure people understand that we just look forward to contributing back to those markets in any way we can.
That's great, Alan. Okay, so another question from John. What open source license is this project under, or are there multiple licenses?
Again, like I said, when I started this, poor Debbie Bryant in the office had more questions for me, and so did Ruth about what's the right license. I read myself into a corner, got myself out of it, and then proceeded to bring myself back into it. Where we've sat on the licensing side is it's all Apache 2 currently. So everything we do, we just for consistency's sake, it's licensed under Apache 2. We figured that would give us the broadest adoption and use. And if we ever had to uplift anything in the future into the Camel community, which is upstream, or any other community, that seemed to be the easiest adoptive way. Again, like I said, all I did was look through information, ask questions, and hopefully we made that right selection.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, we had a little freeze on our end. So Doug asks, what, if any, relationship is there between the new APIs that you're starting up and the SMART project at smarthealthit.org, if that's something you're familiar with?
So we will do everything based on what comes out from others. We're not going to implement anything new. And that's why I said in our in my presentation, we don't focus on the endpoint because we don't want to be creating things that the industry has to address. We want to create things that the community has already adopted. So this is why if people see a standard and they're like, hey, can we implement it? Our answer is always yes, because if it's a standard, that means we can go somewhere and get to it, right? Or can I process data from this source? Our answer is always, if it's supported by our upstream connection community, then absolutely. So ours is about adoption. In some cases, our goal is to provide feedback into that to influence, but it's about adoption.
Okay, and that actually leads into our next question from Ahmed, who is asking, has the solution been tried with any health insurance system providers? And I know probably you don't want to maybe get to the point of reference customers or users yet, but has this been tried out in the field?
Yeah, so the answer is there are many, many implementations of IDaaS that exist already in the field. Keep in mind, the reason we made this a design pattern, and I've only been in the organization less than 11 months, we did a great amount of work to get out to figure out what people were doing and what they were using and what was successful and not. So this capability is being used at many, many of our existing healthcare customers. All we did was uplift it, wrap it as a reusable framework and design pattern, and then add some things for needs. So the answer to the second part of that question is, in the insurance space, we're adding that capability to process that data, but we're also adding the capability to shape that data, like I talked about with Event Builder, which is absolutely critical, right? Because that way, then you've now eliminated that need where you have to process a claim. You're processing the metadata around the claim from wherever it comes from.
Okay, we have time for one last question. Brian asked, so he is saying basically he's not hearing a lot about optimizations. For his example was matching a donor with a recipient, which reduces healthcare costs and death rates. Is that something that we're going to be, IDaaS is going to be looking at moving forward?
So, wow, that's I'm trying to. That's a wonderful question. So here's what I would say to that. IDaaS is all about components. So the goal of what we've built is building components that can be scaled out, right? If you heard my thing, it's a data's the asset, and we want to deliver it in a secure and scalable manner. Well, that secure and scalability is all about what we do in delivering those components. So there's no reason those couldn't be delivered. That is the perfect scenario for the way I would think about it. The technologies we already have talked about with those capabilities, and adding decision management and or a complex event processor or something like that around that, with that rule set and logic to then make sure that those things happen in a repeatable manner.
Okay, great. So I'd also like to thank the Great Outdoors for providing the background music for today's session. That is all the time we have for questions today. Alan, thank you so much for coming on and explaining about this really fascinating new project. We will certainly be posting links to all the things you've mentioned during your presentation on the YouTube video that's coming out for this later today.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. Appreciate all the feedback. Take care. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you. So with that, we wrap up another edition of Community Central. Stay tuned now, where our topic is going to be covering foundations and trademarks and how that affects the industry at large. Until then, everyone take care and have a great day.